I would like to welcome Emily Braley and Matt Hoffner from MTI. Emily is a Maine native and has a passion around economic and community development and has taken part in projects around the globe. She's now with MTI and serves as the Merck Program Coordinator and will let us know what Merck is. Matt currently serves part-time as an entrepreneur in residence with MTI, working with their portfolio companies and applicants to develop success strategies for their individual companies. He's also coordinating the grant programs for MTI, distributing ARPA funding through the MTI programs. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Emily.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the introductions, Terry. I'm going to share my screen now so I can start the presentation on the Merck program. Let's see, I'll put this into presenter mode. All set? Can you all see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Great. Well, it is so great to see you all on this call and to have the opportunity to present the Merck program to you. I can't tell you how excited we are at MTI to finally be launching this program. It has been a long time coming, and we really envision it to be a wonderful resource for the Maine startup community, which of course includes consultants. You all provide such valuable resources to Maine businesses, and we are really grateful to have you here, so welcome. Before I begin with the presentation, I want to make a few comments on how we plan to conduct the presentation. In total, it will take about 20 to 30 minutes to go through the information, followed by a Q&A session. But if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to use the chat box to write your questions, and we will be monitoring that and answering your questions as they come. I will be giving the bulk of the presentation. However, Matt Hoffner is here as well to provide some additional insight. He is really the brains behind the Merck program and has done a lot to get it up and running. So he is a great source of information and will be answering questions as well. Do you have anything to add, Matt, before we get into the presentation? All right, good. Oh, and I do want to make one final comment. We may be experiencing thunderstorms where I am at Sebago. So in the event that I lose power, we have very feeble electric lines here. Matt will be taking over the presentation, but fingers crossed that does not happen. And with that, we are ready to get into the presentation. I think the most meaningful way to start a presentation on Merck is to ask the question of why Merck? Why did MTI create this program? Why did the board of directors approve funding for it? And why will it be such a valuable resource to the Maine startup community? MTI employees, investment officers, e-residents like Matt, and MTI partners have all been in situations where they are working with a company and have identified a critical skill deficiency, which is preventing the company from moving on to the next stage in their development. And although this company may be very enthusiastic about addressing the challenge, they could face two major obstacles. The first obstacle is finding high quality consulting services. MTI and MTI partners may have referrals for consultants, but they may not be able to comment on the quality of those consultants. And in some situations, they may not even have a referral in general. The second obstacle is that startup companies are resource constrained and may not possess the funds necessary to pay for consulting services. So what the Merck program is designed to do, and this is really the heart of the program, is to overcome these two major obstacles. And it does this by making the process of connecting high quality consultants and Maine clients more affordable and more direct. And this is done in two ways. One way is by having a database filled with vetted Maine consultants, and the other way is through cost sharing. So if you believe in supporting Maine startups through offering affordable consulting services, then the Merck program is where you want to be. And before moving on to the Merck to what Merck is. Do we have any questions, Matt?
We're good to go.
We're good to go. All right. So now moving on to what Merck actually is. From the beginning, MTI envisioned Merck, which is the Maine Entrepreneurial Resource Corps, to be a database filled with vetted consultants. And the idea is to use this database to facilitate projects between Maine clients and consultants. And if these projects are approved, then MTI will pay for half of the project cost. And we anticipate this component of the Merck program to be very popular. Clients, of course, they're having half of their project fee paid for, but for you consultants, you have a greater guarantee that your services will be paid for in a timely manner. So it is a win-win situation for everyone involved. That is the Merck program in a nutshell. I will be filling in the details of the program as this presentation continues, but I do want to provide some insight into our long-term vision for Merck. Right now, the Merck database is private to MTI employees, but we really think it will be a phenomenal resource for all Maine businesses and want to make it public in some capacity in the future. We will probably start this process by including MTI partners and allowing them access to the database, and then hopefully to the public in the future. Any questions so far, Matt?
I've answered a few directly in the chat room, so I think you're okay.
Perfect. All right. I'm going slowly through these first pieces of information as they're very foundational to what Merck actually is. So the next piece of information that will be beneficial to discuss up front is what is an ideal Merck project and what can you as consultants expect when working on a Merck project. So the ideal Merck project is a short-term, high-impact project with a defined start, middle, and end. Merck funding is not intended to subsidize part-time employment or fractionalized long-term employment. I do want to say, however, that one of the great things about Merck projects is that they can be used to facilitate long-term relationships between you consultants and clients, but Merck projects themselves must be short-term with clear deliverables that can be achieved in a defined time frame. The second thing we are looking for in a Merck project is that we want to see the project is consistent with the client company's viral assessment. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with viral, it's an assessment tool that is used by MTI to understand the most pressing challenges a business faces. And the reason why we're making this a requirement is to make sure that the client company is directing their hard-earned resources, MTI's resources, and also consultants' time towards an area that can really help the business improve. And finally, we do have a maximum budget of $20,000 for each Merck project. And of course, half of that will be paid by MTI. And this is to give you an idea of the size of projects you may be working on. Of course, many projects might be smaller than $20,000, but that is all case dependent. In addition to talking about what Merck projects may look like, this next slide describes areas in which we hope to provide business services to Merck clients. This list of expertise categories, as we call them, was initially informed through conversations with MTI investment officers about which services their clients needed. However, this list has since expanded with consultant feedback. We started with 9 major categories, and now we're up to 12, which is great. We're happy to have these here. And we additionally have about 40 subcategories total for these general categories. The full list of general categories and subcategories can be found on the Merck consultant application. It's a lot of information to put on one slide, but I have included an example on this next slide. So the general expertise category is information technology, and it has 5 subcategories. And on average, each general category has about 3 subcategories. And again, once you see the application, You can look at these expertise categories to get an idea of what we're looking for and to see what services you could possibly provide to Merck clients.
Emily, there's a question regarding what are the qualifications for the startup companies? Do you want to address that now or fold that into one of your slides that comes later?
That is a wonderful question. I will be addressing the qualifications for client companies in a future slide, but if you have questions after we go over that, please feel free to write another comment and we'd be happy to answer them. But let me know once we get to that slide if your questions are answered. Good to go?
Yep.
Awesome. So now that we have reviewed that important foundational information, I did want to give you an overview of what the Merck process will look like from start to finish. So right now at MTI, we are in the phase of creating the database, which is not included in this process flow. By mid-August, we hope to have around 50 to 60 consultants. But for the purposes of this process flow, we are assuming that the database is filled with wonderful consultants like yourselves. So how this process will start is that a Merck client discovers the Merck program, reads the Merck requirements, hopefully they take this step, and then submits a project and application, at which point myself as the Merck coordinator, I will review the application and the project to make sure the project is consistent with the 3 criteria that were listed a few slides back. And then if the company and project are approved, then I will send the client a list of consultants from the database who could potentially provide the services the consultant requires. At this point, it is fully up to the client to review the consultants, communicate with the consultants, pick which one is the best fit for them. This is all happening independently of MTI. MTI will send the list of consultants, but it is 100% up to the client and consultant about which relationship works best for them. And then we will ask the client and consultant to together draft a statement of work. I want to pause here to take a bit of time to discuss the statement of work. It has become very apparent in conversations with MTI staff and also consultants how important a clear statement of work will be to the success of this program. So we will be requiring and reviewing statements of work. The point of this review is not to tell you consultants how to do your job or to tell you what services you should be providing to the client. You are the expert. It is your relationship with a client company. However, we do believe that the relationship between the client and consultant partly depends on how clearly the statement of work is written, which includes having clear, measurable deliverables. So throughout the project and at the end of the project, both the client and consultant are on the same page regarding the work that is to be done. So we will be reviewing statements of work for clarity. So after that statement of work has been approved and reviewed by MTI, then it is off to the races for you consultants. You can work your magic, complete the project. And once the project is completed, the client will verify the results and provide a performance score, which I will be speaking about in the next few slides. And after those 2 steps have been taken, MTI will then issue 50% of the funding directly to the client.
Emily, there's a couple of questions in the chat box here.
Great.
The first one is, how does this process and this process flow tie into the funding of a potentially overall or bigger project from MTI?
That is a wonderful question. I think it is definitely case dependent, and I think that is something we will have a clearer view of once we start this Merck program. However, I think this Merck program may be a stepping stone for companies who are looking to receive future MTI funding. So there may be a situation where a company has gone through a viral assessment with an investment officer at MTI, and they're not quite at the level where they can receive funding from MTI. Well, then they may be sent to the Merck program to get them in a position to receive future funding. And Matt, I don't know if you have any questions on this. Of course, you're very familiar with how MTI
Yeah,
works.
no, I mean, that's a great answer for a 1-month employee, Emily. You did a good job. But let me just add that we also find at MTI that a significant percentage of the people that apply for funding, especially their initial grant funding, are doing so because they want to use the money for a consultant. If that's all the money that you need and that's all that you're going to use the money for, you'll probably get flipped over to Emily, because we can track the consultant relationship, the SOW, and the match with qualified consultants better in the Merck program than we can in the MTI core program. However, if the consultant is just one part of a much bigger project, then those funds can be obtained out of the MTI core fund and used for consultants or equipment or other components of the project that you would outline in your project plan.
So this is Tova, and I'd originally asked that question. And I'm curious, so if it's part of a bigger project, then it would actually be more part of a tech board approval and go through that process rather than Merck. So it would be a separate process. Is that what I'm understanding?
You're going to
Okay.
start the same place, Tova. I mean, you'll start with the application into MTI. But if it's only going to be a short-term consulting gig that you need some funding for,
Oh yeah, I understand that part. Yeah,
Then
it's the bigger overall piece.
right? If it's a bigger project that involves multiple components over a longer period of time with higher dollar values, you're going to be in the MTI core program with tech board and full investment officer review as well.
Okay, so it would be separate from Merck then.
It would be separate from Merck.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you very much.
Yep. A few other questions, Emily, if I could.
Certainly.
Let's see. Will MTI have a form required for an SOW?
That's another great question. We will not have a form that you need to follow, but we will be providing an outline with components of the statement of work we expect to receive. This will be sent to the client. So when you are working with a client, they will know exactly what they need to include in the statement of work. And we can also send that along to consultants as well, so you can get an idea of what we're looking for. So the short answer is we will not have a form to complete, but we will provide a structure of what we're looking for.
And Carrie asked if we would like ACE could do a program of drafting contracts that will satisfy the Merck grant requirements. So they could offer that as a service to not only their clientele, but other members, other consultants that might be in the Merck database. So that might be a good community building opportunity for us as well, Emily.
Certainly, I think that's a phenomenal idea and would definitely like to talk more about that after the presentation. Great.
Next question, Emily, is do consultants also get to give a performance score for clients?
Mm-hmm. That is a really good question. I think, are there any other questions after this one, Matt, or would
Yeah,
this
there are. Do you want to hold on that one for a
Okay,
second?
yeah, I think I'm going to hold on to that question because we're going to talk about the performance score in the next two slides, but that's a very good question.
Next question is, what flexibility for use of funds will there be for projects that need longer than 3-month timeline?
Another really phenomenal question. If that is the case, where the consulting services require more than 3 months to complete, that would probably be a project that fits MTI core funding more than Merck. Again, Merck is intended for very short-term projects, 3 months max. But if that consulting service requires more time, then MTI core funding might be a better avenue. Do you have anything to add, Matt?
No, and sometimes you can stage projects. You know, you can say that in this 3 months, we're going to get this done.
Mhm.
And we expect that if we're successful with those deliverables in 3 months, the project will continue with these deliverables. That kind of flows, as you said, Emily, directly into the MTI core funding as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, having the multiple phases for the Merck program.
And Emily, another question, what if the client's not a fit for core MTI funding, such that they don't have like novel IP or technology? are they still eligible for Merck funding?
I think that would be a better question for you to answer, Matt,
Sure.
as you have more experience and
Yeah.
more knowledge on what would make a company unqualified for MTI core funding.
Yeah, and let me address first just by stating that the money that we have in the budget for the Merck program for next year, our fiscal year starts in a couple of weeks. The money that's in the budget for the Merck program is coming out of the MTI core funding, which is provided by the state legislature on an annual basis to MTI. That award from the state legislature follows the legislative guidelines that formed MTI 20 years ago. And that original legislation required that MTI funding only be directed to the 7 sectors for MTI. And mostly that's technology-driven applications. And you can always find the list of those 7 areas on the MTI website. So if you're starting a new bakery and you need some help with setting up your accounting QuickBooks or your point of sale system or something like that, unfortunately, that's probably not going to fit an MTI sector. So what Emily, I think, had been mentioning earlier is that we might be able to use the MTI database to connect you with somebody so that you could have a qualified candidate. But unfortunately, we won't be able to fund 50% of that project. Next question is, in order to receive funding from MTI, it's my understanding that applicants must reach a 1 on the viral assessment. Based on what you're sharing, does this mean that early stage businesses are particularly suited for Merck? Yeah, are you familiar with this one, Em? Because I could answer this one as well.
Go ahead.
All right. So the viral scale looks at 8 different characteristics of how a business is evolving, and then gives a rating from 1 to 9 on each of those. In order to start your relationship with MTI, you do need to be at least at a 1. And we would expect that requirement would also apply to Merck. So if the consultant or if the referring company organization, could be MCE, could be Maine Venture Fund, could be somebody from one of the investment officers from MTI, when they refer that business to Emily, they're going to basically say, look, this company's just starting, they're at a level 1, this is the skill set that they need. So we would expect that would be consistent. I think we addressed this next one. How is Merck funded? Are these ARPA funds, which may not be available in future years? No, it's core funding coming out of MTI core. We may qualify for a little bit of extra funding this coming year from ARPA, but we have actually an application in with DECD that will need to be reviewed and approved. Next question, Emily, is, in my experience, MTI does a great job advising applicants which of its programs will work best and strategies for maximizing your success in securing funding. So that's a nice statement. We'll accept that compliment. Thank you. All right, I think we're caught up, Em.
Wonderful. All right, so with that, we will move on to the, keyboard's not working here, performance rating, because we did receive a question regarding the performance rating. And this is I would imagine, a very important topic to you consultants, as you are the ones who will be rated. So I will take this time to discuss what the performance rating is, how we plan to measure performance, and how this information will be used, and also get to that previous question. So we require all clients upon completion of a project to provide a performance rating for consultants. And we do this for 2 reasons. 1, to ensure that the consultants in our database are high quality, and 2, to help guide the decision-making process of future Merck clients. After a lot of feedback and a lot of research, we have developed a rating system where clients are asked to rate the services provided by a consultant on a scale of 1 to 10 for 3 separate components. And those components are performance versus statement of work, which is essentially measuring, did the consultant say or do what they said they were going to do in the statement of work, professionalism, and responsiveness. And then we will take the average of those three components and assign a qualitative rating, which ranges from very unsatisfied to very satisfied. And it is this qualitative rating which will appear on your consultant profile and be sent to future Merck clients. So when a client is sent your profile, they can look at this qualitative rating and say, okay, well, in the past, this consultant has provided very satisfactory service. They're the consultant for me. This is what will happen in the ideal situation, but we do live in a real world, and sometimes people behave in inexplicable ways. So there may be scenarios where you as a consultant do everything you can. You are professional, you are responsive, and you deliver every single agreement in the statement of work. But for whatever reason, a client gives you a bad score. We hope this happens rarely, if not at all. But in those rare scenarios, MTI does reserve the right to remove a performance rating. And I do want to come back to the question that was asked if a consultant can provide a rating or comments on clients. This is a really great question. I will say that we believe in the core mission of Merck, and we believe that it will be a service to Maine businesses, but the details of how that will happen, including this performance score, are still under development and can really only be informed through experience and feedback. So whether or not we allow consultants the opportunity to respond to clients is still not determined. We have been tossing around the idea of allowing clients to provide comments on the services and potentially even requiring clients to offer a comment if they give a rating that is below 5 stars, for example, so we can start to understand what's going on and then reach out to you consultants so you have the opportunity to represent yourselves. But whether or not we open up that rating from client to consultant or consultant to client is still in discussion. I don't know if you have anything to add on that, Matt.
No, I just think it's really important for the consultants to understand that we think we know what's going to happen as we implement the Merck program. But like any plan or program, you're never 100% right. And so we fully expect that we're going to get feedback from both the client and from the consultants as to what's working and what's not working. And I guarantee you that what the Merck program looks like a year from now will be different than what we're telling you today. And that'll be based on your feedback and use of the program. And there's one other question in the chat room. Has MTI thought about utilizing the Merck database of consultants for connecting them to other supported companies that are not in the Merck program?
Another wonderful question. That is part of our long-term goal. The Merck program and Merck funding is for client companies who are within MTI 7 sectors and who qualify for MTI funding. But again, you consultants offer amazing services, and businesses of any size and any sector require consulting services. So down the line in the future, we do want to make this database public. So if there is a company who wants to find consulting services and marketing, then they can use the database to direct them. Does that answer the question?
And just on top of that, there's as we developed the program and we knew we were going to be using MTI core funding, we did review it with DECD, we reviewed it with CEI, we reviewed it with MVF, SCORE. Terry gave us some feedback on this as well. So we fully expect, and we got very, very positive comments from all those groups. There's other organizations in the state that would like to have access to the Merck database so that they can match and provide vetted consultants to businesses that they come across. So I do expect it's going to become a valuable database in the state and applicable for well beyond just MTI clients.
Awesome. Thank you for that addition, Matt. This next slide. Oh, did you have another question to address?
I do. Let's see.
Awesome.
Because most startups companies are unfamiliar with consultancy services, should Merck provide expectations regarding the service areas? A statement of work for developing a WordPress site is clear. A market segmentation consultancy is not as defined.
Could you repeat the first part of that question?
Yeah, because most startup companies are unfamiliar with the consultancy services, should Merck provide expectations regarding the service areas? An SOW for developing a WordPress site is clear. A market segmentation consultancy is not as defined.
Okay. As of now, MTI is not planning on providing an overview of the services we are planning to offer. I'm not sure if that gets at the heart of the question. But I think this next slide in the performance rating, I'm not sure if that question was prompted by a concern that a client in this performance rating might not understand the services a consultant provides, in which case I do talk about that on the slide. But Matt, if you want to add anything before I go into that, please do.
No, I think it's important. I mean, we've got 12 major categories of expertise and 40 subcategories of expertise, but it's probably naive, as the question indicates, to think that a startup company completely understands what it's going to take to have a successful project. I think that is where a very, very clear, well-defined SOW comes into being an important component. So, we will be coaching from the side to the client. Hopefully the consultant already has this experience in developing a very clear SOW and understanding what's going to be required so that we minimize any miscommunication getting started.
That's a great answer.
If I could just clarify that question. Again, things like web services are quite clear. You can design a website very defined, in a very defined fashion. But many times I'll see clients that will ask, my typical customer will give me a customer profile, and then they'll say, we'd like to find a customer segment that suits our product, for example. That is a very complex statement. In many cases, the data is not readily available. And so the expectations have to be less exact than one would expect, for example, a financial consultancy or a web service consultancy. So somehow you have to indicate that this may not be as exact as you would get as you would in another area of expertise. It's just an observation.
Francis, those are very valid points. And I think that I have to rely upon the consultant to help set the expectation with the client as well. And then obviously Emily and the staff at MTI will always be a resource that can say, what Francis is saying is absolutely right. A market segmentation study is not a 1-hour event, right? It's going to require much more research over a longer period of time. And his SOW and the time that he's expecting for this project are reasonable. So there is a sanity check on the part of MTI that hopefully would be supporting your work as well. Emily, one other question that's in the docket here. Will there be ongoing feedback and check-ins through an engagement? It might help smooth out bumps. Often starting businesses don't have informed expectations of what a consultant can provide or what they will be expected to provide. How hands-on will MTI be?
So to clarify for this question, and whoever asked this question, please feel free to chime in. Is this asking if MTI will be engaging with the client to set their expectations and help guide them, or if MTI will be engaging with the consultant to give them updates?
Carrie, do you want to flip on your microphone and ask that or clarify that for us?
Oh, sure. Yeah, let me just give some clarity around it. And it raises another issue in terms of payment, which is near and dear to all of our hearts. So One of the biggest problems I've found, and I did run a mini grant program with a bunch of other consultants where we were basically providing services, and the startup client really did not hit the mark in terms of providing information in a timely manner, which, you know, some of it was just inexperience. I mean, really not getting that we couldn't move forward.
Mhm.
So since you've got a pretty sharp deadline of 3 months, what happens to the consultant? You're only paying us on completion.
Right.
We're supposed to complete within 3 months. Does the money dry up after 3 months? You know, and when you're in that kind of situation, you're always putting yourself in peril that the match isn't going to be paid either.
Yes.
Would we be wise to collect our money up front from the client and wait for the match? I mean, there's so many issues in terms of how you would structure, not just your scope of work, but the payment terms.
Yes.
Here,
Mhm.
that's some hands-on observation, maybe even a little, what would you call it? Tove, help me out. What do you call it when you have a market survey group? You know, kind of a
Focus group, potentially.
yeah, for focus group of advisors. You know, what's working and what's not through the first couple of years of the Merck program on best practices.
Great. That is a wonderful question, and you raise some very important concerns. Yes, so those are questions that I think we will have more insight in once we start this program. But I can imagine, you know, if you're providing a service, you're going to want an answer pretty soon about payment. One thing I can say, and of course, I think Matt has some insight to provide on this as well, is that hopefully the projects and clients that we send you they'll go through a little bit of background themselves. We want to see evidence of competent management on the side of the company. So hopefully we are not sending you, and we'll do our best not to send you companies that are not really engaged and not in a position to receive funding and support from the Merck program. To address that issue before it starts, regarding payment, we will be paying clients directly. However, in our terms and conditions, we did include something that says if this particular client is cash feeble or we have concerns about their ability to pay back the consultant fee, then, oh, excuse me, my camera's doing funny things here, then we will pay the consultant directly. But for the remainder of your question, Matt, do you have any insights?
Yeah, it's a good question from Carrie, because things change, right? And the only thing we know about the plans that we've put together for Merck is that something's wrong. I'm not sure what piece of it's wrong yet, but I know that we didn't get it 100% right going into it. Carrie, we fully expect, I mean, we're hoping that the projects are about 3 months, because that's, again, part of the original structure to make sure that these are short, impactful projects with clear milestones during that 3 months as well. If a project languishes and goes to 4 or 5, does the money go away? No, it does not. And if we need to make an exception in the payment process, will we do so? Absolutely. It's just that our guidelines right now, our goal would be to make sure that these are short projects versus MTI core programs, which can go on for years, as you know. And it kind of ties into the other question that came in, Emily, is that, you know, things change. You know, as you know, Emily, 30 or 40% of the project plans that we get as part of the MTI core funding change as the project gets started, right? You learn something new, you got to move in a new direction. Will clients need to keep you informed and write new SOWs if that occurs?
Again, I think I'll give my first take on this, and I think it would be helpful to have your opinion too, Matt. In talking with one of our investment officers, Scott at MTI, he had mentioned that a statement of work changing is not entirely a bad thing. It could indicate that a company is learning more about their needs. So if the statement of work does change, Again, as Matt said, that is usual, and we expect that to happen in this program.
I
I
think
would
you're right.
imagine.
No, you're absolutely correct. It happens all the time, and we would expect it to continue, but we would expect that the SOW gets changed, because that's really the report card that we're all going to use at the end. And we would really, when you look at the 20-year history of MTI, where we've had significant issues with clients, it's been because the SOW has been a little too loose or incorrect. And so, yes, we would like to update the SOW if a change is necessary, but we fully support changes as part of the process. One more question, a couple. I often find that early stage clients are gobsmacked by how involved they will need to be in the consultancy, particularly in terms of timely exchange of information that would affect the timeliness of completion. So I think the question there is, are you willing to provide a mulligan if it needs to go beyond 3 months?
I think, Matt, do you want to take that one? You had
Sure.
started an answer on that when discussing with
Yeah, no,
Peter, so
and again, the SOW needs to clearly indicate that the client needs to do X, Y, and Z in order for this to be successful. And if they can't do it, or they won't do it, or this is not a good time in their business to provide that that level of commitment to the project, then now is probably not the best time to start the Merck project. But if there's an expectation and they agree to it, then we're off to the races. If they get hit by a bus, unfortunately, or gets delayed, again, if the project goes a little bit longer, we certainly understand that, and we're not going to hold your feet to the fire on the 91st day. I think, should Merck serve as an escrow service for the 50% share? You understand that question, Em?
Nope, and it's probably better for you to answer it.
Okay, no, that's fine. I think what the question is, and this is from Francis, we collect the 50% from the client up front and hold it, and then we match our 50% and provide the 100% back at the end of the project. My gut feel is that I'm hoping that clients are reserving funding for their share of the Merck project. If we find that our 50% is not being matched, or you're being stuck with a 50% bad debt on Merck projects, then that's clearly an indication that we need to change the payment processing system at Merck. So we're open to that, but we'll see if it ends up being a problem.
Yeah, if I could,
Sure.
I've been peppering you with questions in the chat, and I'm sorry, that kind of is
Okay.
me. But as everybody will tell you, but the reason I'm doing it is, I'm a lawyer, and as I'm sitting here, I'm trying to think of how I would develop a contract that accommodates, the 50% match. Sometimes you have a client dispute, as you've observed, where it's not entirely fair. Consultants, what they has done, what the consultant wants or believes needs to be done, and the client disagrees. And so I'm just trying to figure out, what role a discussion of that in the contract itself, in the event of a dispute, this is how it's going to be resolved, might be something that could be done up front.
Mhm.
There are ways of doing that.
There are. To be honest with you, Carrie, we're trying, maybe unsuccessfully, but we're trying not to be in the middle of the long-term relationship between the consultants and the client. We're happy to do the match. We're happy to provide the 50%. We're happy to provide guidelines for what is a good SOW and encourage the communication that's necessary in order to get one created. But at that point, we would like to think that there's a long-term relationship building and developing between the consultants and the client that we will not be part of long-term.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what role you want us to play, or that we could play in that scenario
No.
that you outlined.
I think Matt, it's that if you don't want to have the role, then that's something the consultant needs to consider in drafting the consultant's contract. I mean, it really is that simple. And we're just grateful that you've put in the program. We don't want it to make it harder for you to do. I'm thinking ahead to this. And also realize that, while I've been in practice since 1983, 20 years of that was in litigation. So I only saw things that had blown up. I'm a recovering litigator.
Right.
So.
No, I understand your perspective. When I talked to our attorney at MTI, Liv Butler, who's been with us for 20 years, she has the same perspective. What happens when it blows up? I get it.
Yeah. It makes us downers.
Well, that's what you get paid for, right?
Yeah.
But I let us come back to you, Carrie, specifically with some recommendations, because although we're not going to provide a template for an SOW, we will provide guidelines. And one of those guidelines will be dispute resolution. How do we solve this if this happens going forward? And it's a good point that we need to check off in a good SOW. Mm-hmm. So let me ask Emily to get back to you on that one.
Yeah, I think if I could chime in, I think that's a good thing to look at, because one of the keys here is the performance rating, and we're being rated, and is that rating going to be fair?
I understand.
Because that's then going to go to other organizations as our rating.
Yes.
Right.
I've been a consultant myself, and I understand the sensitivity associated with a one-way rating system, as we've outlined today. And I can assure you that we've looked at rating systems that are in the industry from major organizations, Airbnb, Amazon, and others, and tried to figure out what's working and what's not working for them, and actually what would apply for what we're trying to get started here at Merck. I anticipate that the quality rating system will probably be one of those items that will go through change over the next year. And yet the money that we received that was approved by the board of directors of MTI, one of the only requirements that they gave us was that these consultants have to be vetted and rated by the client. That was a requirement that they gave us when they gave us the money. So now we're trying to take that direction or that mandate and figure out what's fair.
Yeah.
There's another, I understand it's tricky, and I can share you a story on Airbnb, because it was one way. I went on a trip to Airbnb in Toronto, and we thought it was fine, and they thanked them, and we sent a text and everything, and did everything that was required, cleaned up afterwards. And then afterwards, 3 years later, we tried to use Airbnb, and apparently we'd been banned, and we had no idea why. What we did, and there was no recourse or anything. And it was like, well, thanks, Airbnb. It was just very strange.
And in Toronto, interesting.
Yeah,
yes,
everybody's nice in Toronto.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. I mean, we thought we were placed. We thought we were getting along. We cleaned up. We followed it. We even sent a text afterward. Had a great time. Thank you. And 3 years later, we found that we were there. She wasn't happy, and we were had a bad rating. We had, and there was no recourse.
Yep.
But there is another option. There is another service on Upwork that does sort of consulting and so on, and they have things on escrow, and they have a rating service, and that might be something to look at too.
We'll do that. Thank you.
Certainly.
And we also looked at the Uber process, where you get to rate the Uber driver, but the driver also gets to rate the client, right? Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the client doesn't. We as users of Uber don't know what our rating is. All right, I don't think we do. I'm not a big Uber user, but if we get feedback from a client that the consultant's experience was very poor, I would think that you would like to get that feedback as well and have a chance to respond to it. So we're trying to build back in the back end. How do we handle and show negative comments in the response from the consultants. And if it's just completely unfair, as Emily indicated, we're just not going to use it. It's just not going to be part of your score.
What is there a possibility that you only know it internally and it's not shared with further applicants that allows you to exercise some discretion in the recommendation without completely torpedoing the consultant's reputation? Because these things get out.
No, they will. And that's why we're really sensitive about trying to do it right and take incremental steps before we make wholesale changes in the process. You know, the information, the actual scored number is only available to MTI employees right now, or those employees that have access to the MTI, the Merck database. But we have to give a quality rating of some sort in order to meet the requirements given to us by our board of directors. So that's why Emily's slide here is trying to indicate how the numbers kind of morph into a more qualitative assessment rather than just a pure objective numerical average.
Right. But my question more, Matt, is did the board require you to provide this the number or numbers to the applicant? Or is that something?
No, they did.
Okay.
They wanted this to be public data available to potential users of the client users of the Merck database.
Yeah. It's a tightrope.
It is. And boy, we are all ears on this. So as we get into this and the projects begin to start this fall, really would love to get your feedback as to whether or not this is working. So stay tuned for changes. I can guarantee you they're coming. Just not sure what they are yet.
Yeah. No, fair.
One idea just to throw in there for thought is maybe just starting internally to start and then moving out, see how it works.
Well, you know, the nice thing is, well, not the nice, the hopeful thing is I expect that if we encourage really good communication and a strong statement of work, that we're going to find that we have a lot of successful projects with a lot of very successful ratings.
Right.
So I'm hoping that we're going to start with a string of very high scores. So at that point, we've confirmed that all of our consultants are smart. We've done a good job of making sure the SOWs are well written and everybody gets paid and we're off to the races. If our initial experience is poor, then we're going to have to scrap it and take it off and try something new. So I don't think we would stop the program. We would just have to rework what the quality scoring is going to look like on the back end.
Yeah, you have a good point.
I mean, Maine is kind of like Toronto. Everybody's friendly. Everybody's nice, right? So hopefully we'll start strong. Do you want to finish up, Em?
Oh, sure. I'm just seeing, Douglas, did you have your hand up with a question or a comment before we continue?
Just a quick option for you.
Certainly.
I've been a consultant for about 20 years and I also coach consultants. And one thing that I've found works for me and most of the people I coach is when we do a project, the customer pays 50% upfront. Now we're both in the game together. We both hope that the project goes well. And we both have the skin in the game for it to go well. And even if something happens and they change the project or whatever else, at least the consultant is not, because all we have to, offer is time and opportunity cost.
Right.
And so, but just an option or thought.
It's a good practice, Douglas. I mean, if that's your typical practice and you want that to continue, that's certainly between you and the client. We're not going to get involved in that. But our 50% will come at the end once the successful project has been validated.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your comments and questions, everyone. I'll briefly go over just this part of the performance rating to give you a little bit more insight and hopefully address some of the concerns about a performance rating and some concerns consultants have brought to our attention in communications. Also, I apologize, my camera lighting is going in and out. I expected it to be overcast today and I'm in a place with a sunroof, so it's having a little bit of an exposure problem. But to give you an example of how this performance rating will unfold, say you got a rating of a 9 for your statement of work, a 7 for responsiveness, and an 8 for professionalism, then your average overall score will be an 8, which puts you in the very satisfied category here. And this very satisfied is the qualitative rating, which will be on your profile. As Matt said, we have gone through many different versions of this performance rating, and we'll probably go through many more. But this particular system was intended to address 2 concerns, which was 1, performance ratings are by nature very subjective. So to remove some of that subjectivity, we created a little bit of a margin of error. So you could receive an 8, a 9, a 10, or really anything above a 7.5 since it's an average, and still be considered to provide very satisfactory services. The other concern is that a client may not understand the value you bring to them as a consultant. Some things are a little bit more nebulous and really difficult to understand the impact in that moment. So we chose 3 criteria that are not so much based on what you do, but rather how you did it, and if you did what you said you were going to do, which again circles back to the importance of the statement of work. But again, this performance rating can only be improved through feedback, so please feel free to continue to add your feedback, either now or at the end of the presentation, or reach out to me in the future. We would really appreciate that.
Emily, one more question came in from Carla.
Of course.
It says, I think any rating 5 stars or below should require feedback to MTI from the consultants.
I think that's a very good point. Again, we are still trying to understand if we are requiring comments. We were advised to proceed carefully when allowing comments, but I do think the point of if the client rates a consultant below 5 stars, then we want to know what's going on there, and allow you consultants to represent yourselves and take actions accordingly. So that's a very good comment and very good insight.
The other thing I would just throw on top of that, Emily, is that, we're expecting 5 to 8 projects a month coming in. I mean, that's what we're budgeting right now. And so Emily, as a full-time Merck coordinator, is going to be fairly intimately knowledgeable about what's going on. And hopefully the relationship that she's building with all of you will allow you to pick up the phone, or for her to pick up the phone and have a nice, frank discussion about, that project or what's coming up or what may have happened. So this isn't a fully automated system. It's a lot of personal interaction with Emily as well.
Yes, I fully invite that. Thank you for adding that, Matt. Okay. So moving on to this next slide, and this slide will hopefully address a question that we received earlier on about the qualifications for Merck clients. But I will actually be starting on the right-hand side of this table. And I think this will be very helpful for those of you who are thinking about applying to Merck, which we hope you all do, as this right side of the column outlines all of the requirements we are looking for in an application. So to start, we are looking for a brief background information. So if you work well in any industries or specialize in particular industries or work well with a certain business size, this would be a great place to put that information. We are also asking for 2 recent written customer references, a fee schedule. I'm going to gloss over this fee schedule now and talk about it in the next slide. So if you have any questions, hopefully I answer them in the next slide, but if not, please feel free to ask a question. We are also looking for a website link, a LinkedIn account if available, and a unique entity identifier number, which is the new federal standard for certifying a business. If you do not have one yet, you can go to sam.gov and register for a UEID number. It is completely free, and MTI has a whole page dedicated to explaining the UEID number and how to get one, and that is linked in the application as well as to our Merck consultant webpage. We are also hoping and looking to see that companies are verified with the Maine Secretary of State, And this verification and the UEID number are intended to make sure that the businesses in our database are real tax-paying businesses. And finally, we have a strong preference for Maine-based consultants. This will not always be the case. There may be unique circumstances where a client company is looking for a service that cannot be provided in Maine, in which case we will look outside the state. But in all other scenarios, Maine consultants will receive priority in recommendations to clients. Are there any questions so far, Matt, before going on to the?
Go ahead.
Perfect. Awesome. So regarding the client qualifications, we expect that a client submits a project that is a fit for Merck. So it is a short-term project consistent with the viral score and within Merck's budget. We also, as MTI, require that any company that goes through MTI is within our 7 technology sectors. And to give you a size of the companies that we hope to work with, we expect that companies will have less than 2 million in annual revenue, although this is not a rigid threshold. The intuition behind this is that if a company has more than 2 million in annual revenue, they can probably pay for consulting services on their own. But of course, there may be exceptions to this. And finally, this is a very important point and hopefully addresses some concerns that have been raised throughout this presentation. We do want to see evidence of competent management, and we do want to see that this company is in a position to be receiving assistance from Merck. We will take a number of steps to verify this, but one important piece of information is who recommended the company to us. So if the company is referred to Merck internally through MTI or through one of MTI's partners, we have a pretty good guarantee that this company is serious and is a fit for Merck. But if they come externally, we will be doing additional research and having a couple sessions with the company to understand what their needs are and understand what their management looks like.
Emily, one of the questions from Terry is that, part of the MTI core program is that companies be pursuing an innovative idea. Is innovation a requirement for Merck?
I think you would be better suited to answer this, Matt.
Sure.
But I also think it might be, correct me if I'm wrong, we have a little more flexibility in Merck since it would be difficult to pursue something innovative in a short time period of 3 months. This is mostly for consulting services, but I'll let you take it away, Matt.
The history at MTI is that we will always stretch to try and find that the business has some affiliation with one of the 7 sectors. So we're trying to be as lenient as we possibly can. So assuming that we can get you into one of the 7 sectors, the requirement for Merck is that this short-term, high-impact project will contribute positively to your viral score. It addresses one of your key challenges and fixes a problem at the company. So, if your issue is that you just never set up QuickBooks properly and you need somebody to come in and fix all your chart of accounts and receivable process, that's not truly innovative, but it's extremely important for a business that's trying to grow. That would qualify for a Merck project.
Yeah, I guess my question was more on the client, the type of client it is. I recognize that the short-term consultancy might not be an innovative project, but does the client have to be pursuing an innovation in order to qualify for Merck?
I'll mealy mouth this response, Terry, so I apologize in advance, but we will be as lenient as we possibly can in the definition of innovation. Somebody's saying that they're going to implement a new CRM system for their business. Is that truly innovative? I mean, that's been around for, 50 years. However, it is a use of technology that solves the problem. It will provide a great benefit to the business going forward. We would most likely stretch and say that that's a technology application and you're included in the 7 sectors, and your project would be approved for Merck because it has that short-term high impact potential as well. So, it will be on a case-by-case basis, but I think you'll find that we'll be stretching as hard as we can to make sure that the company is in the 7 sectors. And if they are, then hopefully the project will have the high impact, will be a high impact project that would qualify for Merck.
Awesome.
Last question here. Will a sole proprietor with a federal ID number qualify?
Yes, I believe, yes.
Yes, it is. How would Merck weigh a company to qualify if the challenge they have is their management?
That's a great question.
Well, I can answer that by saying I was a consultant, and there are companies that I dealt with that I wish I had never gotten started, right? They just were clueless, and they didn't understand what it was going to take to make a successful project. I'm hoping that the referral process and the due diligence that Emily will be doing on the front end will ensure that the customer, the client, is one that would benefit from the Merck project. So if the management is the problem and the management is the person that we're dealing with, then there's a likelihood that the Merck project would not get approved.
Awesome.
Back to you, Em.
Perfect. Okay, so now we will circle back to the fee schedule, which I had mentioned in the previous slide. This is an area where we have also received, understandably, a lot of feedback from consultants. And is another area of Merck that will probably evolve over time. But we do want to provide clients with a fee schedule as another piece of information to help them in their decision-making process. We understand, however, that fees may vary based on a project, and without actually talking to a client and understand their needs, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to provide a fee schedule that covers every scenario. So because of that, a fee range or an average fee is perfectly acceptable. And we also expect that the final fee will be negotiated between you and the client, and we will make that clear to the client as well. I've included an example at the bottom of this slide of what would be acceptable for a fee schedule. It can be longer than this, but a couple sentences giving a fee range and saying that the final fee will be negotiated between client and consultant is completely acceptable and doesn't reveal any proprietary information, but is informative to the client when making their decision. Any questions so far on this?
Nope. Good to go.
Awesome. And if you're still typing a question, we can come back to it. And finally, to probably the most important slide for a group full of consultants is, what are we planning to do for our consultants? If it isn't clear by now, you consultants are the foundation of this Merck program, and without you, we would have no services to provide to our Merck clients. So we really value you. And because of that, we've come up with a few ways to promote you internally, as well as externally to MTI partners in the startup community, and also ways to keep you updated on Merck. So internally, we will be notifying investment officers who work with MTI companies on a regular basis of the addition to new consultants to the database, and also semi-regularly giving them a list of consultants. So MTI investment officers are aware of your services and aware of what's available when talking with clients. We also have the option to include one page of marketing material in your profile. So this is an opportunity for you to market yourself to the client however you want. If you have special services for small businesses or a really interesting package, this would be a great place to put that. Finally, we will be giving you a notification when your profile is sent to a client, and also the client's contact information. So you can initiate the relationship between you and the client should you choose to. Externally, we will have a monthly consultant spotlight. Our first one will be coming up in July, and it will be included in MTI's newsletter. And once the newsletter has run its course, we will save that spotlight and put it in a library on our website So anyone at any time can access these spotlights and get in more information on consultants. And we additionally plan to host Merck Moments, maybe 2 to 3 times a year. And what a Merck Moment will look like is we will invite maybe 4 to 5 consultants to give a short presentation on industry trends to the ecosystem community to help client businesses understand what they should be looking for in the future, and also who could potentially help them with those issues. And finally, we will be having quarterly updates sent out to all of our consultants. If you have any information you would like to receive on a quarterly basis, please also include that in the chat or email me later with that information. We would be happy to provide that to you. Presently, we are thinking of sending in these quarterly updates any trends that we notice. So what services are in demand by our clients, how many projects we're working on, how much money is going out the door, etc. So again, if there's any information you would like to have, please don't hesitate to let us know. And we also ask that consultants be available for a 30-minute meeting with myself, the Merck coordinator. This is an opportunity for you to share with me all of your services, all you have to offer. The more informed I am about what you do, the more accurately I can represent you and refer you to clients. And I also love getting to talk with consultants and form personal relationships. So you feel comfortable reaching out to me with any concerns or feedback you may have. It's also really fun. It's probably a highlight of my job so far is meeting with consultants. I've really enjoyed that these past few weeks. So please do set that up with me and I'd love to talk to you. Any questions so far, Matt?
Nope.
Awesome. So that brings us to the very last slide in this presentation, which discusses timing. So right now until the end of July, we are hoping to add 50 to 60 consultants to our database, and we'd like all of you to be in there if possible. By August and September, once our database is filled to our satisfaction, then we will open up the Merc program to project applications. I want to end this presentation before going into the Q&A by circling back to MTI's long-term vision. We really do believe this Merc program will be a huge asset to Maine businesses, however it looks a year from now, 2 years from now. And not just to MTI companies who receive Merc funding and are within the 7 sectors, but really to all Maine businesses of every size. Everyone needs consulting services, and we all really value the insight consultants have. So if you believe in this mission and want to contribute to it, we would love to have your application and learn about the services you provide. And with that, we will be opening up this presentation to questions and comments. But before doing that, I want to thank you all and to thank ACE for the opportunity to present. We are really grateful for this. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to email myself at ebraley@Maine Technology. And you can also find an application to become a Merck consultant on our Merck consultant webpage. Hopefully we can get the slide presentation sent to you all so you have access to this information and can click on these links that will bring you right to the application. But with that, thank you so much. And we now invite additional questions and comments. I know we've covered a lot, but if you have more, please feel free to do so.
Emily, I already promised people that you would get the copy of the slides to everybody. So
awesome.
Yep, great.
I can do that.
Yeah. If you can send a copy to me, I'll just send it out to the registration list.
Great. Thank you so much, Terry.
Well, I just want to say this has been great information, and thanks very much for presenting it in so much detail, Emily and Matt. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming, and we look forward to working with you. Obviously, it's as Emily said, you're a key part of the equation here. So we're looking forward to having you, your group join up.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
So do we have any more questions for Emily or Matt?
Terry,
Okay.
we just bombarded them with questions. We need to give a break now.
Well, I guess the bombardment is done, and we can give you 4 minutes of your morning back. But thank you very much, Emily and Matt. I think that this
You're
is going to be a great program. And like any great program, I'm sure it'll be redesigned 20 times before it becomes truly
We
great.
just don't know what parts are wrong yet.
Right.
Sure.
So, yeah, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. And thanks for tolerating our 10 minutes of business that we needed to do.
No problem. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.